Welcome back to the McCann Dogs Podcast, Season 3, Episode 11, and I can't believe we've already recorded Episode 7.
I was thinking, Shannon, are you serious?
Really?
I was thinking something about 7 as well. I was going to say, wait, I thought it was only 7. We are so on track.
Wow.
What a team.
I'm impressed with that. Oh my goodness. Robbie and I are sharing a brain these days.
That's cool. I'm happy to share a brain with Shannon. She's pretty brilliant.
Aw, that is so kind. Well, right back at you, Robbie. I really enjoy our training chats.
Me too.
And we just recorded an episode where we were reminiscing back in the days where young Jaden and young, would that have been Scurry and young Scramble and all our dogs the dogs that we have said goodbye to at this point because it was a long time ago, but them going on lots of property walks together and being best buddies and learning so much. We used each other's dogs so much to help train our own dogs, etc. So, this episode talking about old dogs seems really apropos.
Sad in some ways, though.
Well,
sad but happy.
Yeah. So I have an old dog living with me right now. And we are at that cusp where it's sort of like, okay, you can do whatever you want because I'm going to be missing you soon. So I'm sure you can hear the quiver coming into my voice, even just thinking about it. So Reggie, my old boy, my old toller, he turned 14 last week. So we're starting to have that thought process. And I've made some adjustments, of course, in life to make sure that Reggie continues to be comfortable. And hopefully he is still here for a lot more years to come. But, that's not up to me. So all I can do is adapt with him and provide him with a great life and great continued quality of life. And that means making some adjustments. So we thought today that we would talk about the old dogs and talk about some of the things that we do to make sure that their life continues to be good quality as they age. So right off the hop, I want to jump on vet visits and wellness exams. Tell me, Robbie, with your dogs, when they get, so let's say their senior dogs technically are 7 and up. And then the next level is sort of the 10 and up where we kind of categorize our senior dogs. So you've got a 7-year-old dog. What are you doing in terms of wellness exams, in terms of just making sure everything is still running like clockwork?
Yeah, I do regular vet visits with my dogs. I do it even with the young dogs, but even more so with the older dogs. And, one of the things I keep up on is blood work, making sure that everything is functioning properly.
So is this once a year?
Once a year, generally. Okay. And there have been times where I've done blood work multiple times during the year just to check on things, especially as they're getting older. I have a fantastic veterinarian who helps me to keep my dogs in tip-top shape.
Fabulous. And having a baseline with blood work is so important because as much as we know certain values need to be in certain places, there is variety. There is some variability that happens. So it's important to know if your dog's baseline is at a specific point. It's important to know that so that you don't panic if something is a little bit out of whack. Diet can make changes, etc. So it's really nice to have a baseline when your dog is healthy. And I would say that I'm very similarly minded. I like to have a lot of blood work. If something is going on that I'm a little bit uncertain about and I want a window into what that might be, blood work is going to be one of the first things that I go to. I do it yearly as well. After 7, I make sure that they're going in for that. Once a year, at least, at minimum, we book a wellness exam and go in and do some blood work and just make sure that things are good. I might do, like a test for like a heartworm test or something of that nature at that time of year. I might do vaccinations depending on where I'm at with my dogs. I usually will think about titers when they start getting a little bit older versus revaccinating again. But those are things that are important. They're good to know because our dogs are often really good at hiding pain.
They sure are. Yeah, they're so stoic.
Yeah, and instinctually, they really don't want to let anybody know that there's a weakness or something going on. That's just an instinct. So what are some of the things that will set you off in terms of being a little bit concerned or wanting to get in and just check blood work? And what are some of the signs that you see in your dog that would make you do that?
Yeah, first thing that comes to mind would be their eating habits. If they're still eating normally. And my dogs are the kind of dogs where you put their bowl down and the food's gone in a matter of seconds. They don't lift their nose out of the bowl until the last kibble has been eaten. So I pay very close attention to their eating habits. And if anything seems off in that way, then that would cause me to call my vet. I watch carefully for any sort of mobility changes or their desire to do things, just their general everyday habits. I keep a really close eye because sometimes, things happen slowly, and you don't really realize because you see them, you're looking at them all the time. And so it's so important to be observant when you have an older dog, and like we said, they're so stoic. They're so good at hiding things, It's just one of those things where we have to really pay close attention. And if my spidey sense starts tingling, I'm calling my vet.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that spidey sense can come for me sometimes if Ned was gassy last week, and that's unusual for him. So I was making note of that. And I'm not sure if there was just maybe something going on. It passed and it was a non-issue, but that as an example is out of character for him. So it made me sit up and take notice. Now he's not my old boy, but we still like to make sure that any changes do not go unnoticed. So yeah, changes in appetite for sure. Changes in bathroom habits. If they've suddenly got a little bit of a looser stool and there's no real explanation for that, maybe they didn't, maybe you got into a bunch of new treats. So that softened their stool a little bit, but maybe they've been eating their regular diet and all of a sudden their stool is changing, and that is unusual. And it's something to keep note of. Bringing a stool sample into the vet once a year is a great idea for making sure that there's no parasites, et cetera. Puppies are dewormed regularly, but as our dogs get older, we don't tend to deworm them, and sometimes they get worms. I actually had my first experience with roundworms with Ned, who was, I think, 11 or 12 months at the time. I have a lot of grubs in my yard. They do a lot of wandering around. I don't treat my yard with anything, of course, because of the dogs. I don't want all the chemicals and whatnot. So the raccoons are always pulling up grubs, and I'm quite certain that whatever Ned ate out in the yard, one day he vomited and there was a big round worm in it, and I was horrified. He was 11 or so months, and it just was, I called the vet and I was like, this is what is happening right now. And she was like, okay, come on in and we'll give you this. And I was like, okay, but you don't understand. It's a big, no, it's fine. It happens all the time. It happens to you guys. It doesn't happen to me. This is awful. Anyways, it was, I survived it, but things happen, right? Like keep an eye on. It's so important to catch those parasites early. And I was glad that I caught it at that moment. I'm sure that I would have caught it by doing a stool sample at some point that year as well, but lucky that it came out that way. Any changes, anything that's unusual for your dog, it's always good to ask why. Don't think stubborn. If their bathroom habits or something like that change, don't go right to stubborn, because it's not even logical. It doesn't make sense. No. Think about what's surrounding that. If my dog suddenly didn't want to pee, I would be thinking like, is there a blockage? Or maybe
they're peeing a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe there's
infection.
Yeah, exactly. So there's going to be something there if they're not if they're drinking a lot and they're not peeing, for example. Maybe I've changed their food and there's dehydrated properties going on there because there's more sodium in the food or something of that nature. So it's always good to make note of changes. And if it doesn't make sense, seek help. Call your vet. At the very least, call your vet.
Yeah, don't go on Facebook and ask your friends.
Oh, yeah.
Call your vets, please.
You know what? That is a really good point to make, Robbie. There's a lot of advice out there in the Facebook community, and it's also anecdotal and based on the singular experiences of people who are not experts. So talk to the experts when you need, especially medical advice.
Yeah.
Especially medical advice.
And I just think about ourselves as trainers. How many times do we have people come to us and ask us medical questions, and we're thankful they're asking, but they're asking the wrong person. We're always going to say, call your vet. They are the ones to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can definitely share our experiences with you, but in the end, they're just as anecdotal as the people on Facebook, because that's not our lane. We are not experts in health. We are experts in training.
That's right.
So noticing any changes, checking in with your expert vet, and making sure that you get a good, solid opinion from an expert on what's going on. Some of the other changes, a lot of the times people think that old dogs don't like learning new tricks. Let's talk a little bit about this, because I'll tell you, Reggie still loves to train at 14 years of age, and I've never had an old dog that didn't enjoy training. So tell me about your routine with your old dogs. Do you stop training them because they're old?
Oh, absolutely not. I continue doing stuff with them. I think about Scramble. Scramble lived. She was 17 years old when I lost her. Scramble was a firecracker of a dog. I have to say, I love all of my dogs dearly, but Scramble was a super special girl to me.
I agree.
One of those dogs, she made me work hard as a puppy.
She did.
She was independent. She was sassy. She made me work hard, but she made me a better trainer, and we developed a great relationship because we had to work so hard together. But she lived to be 17 years of age, and a very healthy 17 as well. I'm so grateful. But right up until even just days before I lost her, we were out in my backyard doing agility. Now, let me clarify. She was not doing dog walks and teeter-totters and A-frames or weave poles. I would set my jump standards out, and I would put the bar on the ground, and she would literally do this little hop over the bar. I have video of her, and she is having so much fun at 17 years of age. Running around, doing her little, sure, she made tons of mistakes, and, who cares? It was all about just having fun.
Exactly.
And then when I would reward her at the end, she would always do her little donuts. You know how she'd do her little spin outs where she'd bark and do the little spin in a circle?
I remember.
She was still doing that at 17 years of age, having a blast. So with my old dogs, I do lots of stuff with them. Now, and I should clarify, when I say lots, I don't overwork them by any stretch of the imagination. Our training sessions, a couple of minutes long, it's more about the brain activity than it is about the physical activity at that point. Although I will say my dogs were very physically active even as older dogs. Yeah. And I think part of the reason they were is because, I took great care of them throughout their life, great veterinary care, but I do things with them. I keep that brain engaged, and it just makes all the difference in the world for them. It just improves their quality of life so much.
Yeah, it really is so important. So in terms of knowing what is too much for your dog, what is too much for that old dog, what are some of the signs that you look for to know, okay, you know what I did with my dog was maybe a little bit too much for them at this age?
Yeah. If later during the day, they get up and they're a little more stiff than they would normally be, then it would be an indication. But I will say rarely did that happen with me because I was always careful. But, things happen, and sometimes they do overexert themselves even when you're trying to get them to be, a little bit more settled and relaxed as they're doing their thing. But, I'll watch them. If they're looking a little sore later that day, or if they're not as eager the next day to do something, then I know, okay, well, maybe we did a little bit too much, and then we'll just adapt from there.
I look at how much they sleep as a recovery afterwards. Reggie, for example, I started to drastically shorten the walks that I was taking him on. And of course, this is within the last couple of years I've been adjusting, because as he would get to the point where he was getting to exhaustion and it was just getting to be too much for him, it would take him a couple of days to recover. Like he would spend most of the next couple of days sleeping. And I thought, it's obviously too much for him. So that's one of the signs that I look for. If they really take a long time to recover from that period of exercise, it's normal for them to do a little bit of, up and down in terms of peaks and valleys. They don't always have completely even energy. But if it takes an extreme amount of time for them to recover from it, it's definitely too much. In terms of mental stimulation and that old can't teach old dogs new tricks adage, that's really more of a human applicable adage, I would say, than dogs. Dogs love to learn new tricks. So do you start new stuff with your old dogs?
I don't really start new specific tricks. Like I still will do a lot of shaping with my dogs when they're older, shaping where we basically are allowing the dog to offer different behaviors, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll have, a certain little activity in mind. For example, I might put a cone or a pylon on the ground and shape my dog to go around it. Or maybe I shape my dog to go touch their nose to the cone, just different things to encourage them to think. And what I love about it is that it really engages the dog and it teaches them to, think and be focused. But it's not a lot of physical exercise for them. So it's a really great thing for those older dogs just to keep them having fun and enjoy, doing things with us.
Awesome. I love that. I also love the idea of learning really is a skill. It sure really is a skill. If you look at kids, they are primed and ready for learning. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that they practice it all the time. Yep. And the other is that from a development perspective, that is the time to learn. And it's the same with our dogs for the most part. So they're primed to learn when they're young dogs. And then learning becomes passé when we don't continue to prime that. When we don't continue to oil it and use it as a skill, that skill does become a really hard one to call on. So I do like to make sure that I keep doing new things with my dogs. You know, I'm always looking for something new. Recently, both Robbie and I got into scent discrimination stuff or scent detection stuff, and just working with a different activity. I learned so much. I was amazed at how much, like, you get to a point in dog training where you know that you'll never know all there is to know about dog training. But sometimes I still have these moments where I almost want to sit down because I'm like, so mind boggled that I just learned so much more about my dog. Yeah. And with every new activity I try with my dogs, that is the case. I learn so much more about them. And scent was so fulfilling for that because it was a completely different perspective for me. Everything that I do is me running the show, me telling the dog what they should do, me looking for them, making good choices, et cetera, et cetera. When you're doing scent, it's the dog running the show because you don't know what their nose is thinking. So you need to rely on them telling you, them keeping the work going and them telling you where that odor is. And it really is all up to them. There's nothing I can do to really guide him on this path except making sure that I'm setting up good scents that he will be able to find without trouble. The rest is up to him. So I got to learn so much about his tendencies as I was watching him figure out all of this stuff surrounding scent. I learned so much about Ned. And I did a little bit of scent with Reggie too, obviously a much lower key version of it where Ned, you know, he'll be in a room and searching the whole room, whether it's high, low, on top of things, etc. Reggie would have a much more muted version of it, but I still learned stuff about Reggie at 14 years old and about his tendencies. And not a lot of them surprised me because his real focus and motivation in life is food. Like he is a walking stomach and that's what drives his behavior. But, do you find that when you're training your old dogs, do you find that they're still well oiled to learn? Do you find that they are giving you opportunity to learn?
Absolutely. I mean, every training session, I'm learning something with my dogs, you know, whether I'm training a puppy, training an experienced adult, training an older dog. Every training session is a learning opportunity, you know, and I just think, I think about Kit. My mom and dad have a Papillon who's, she's either 14 or 15 now. She turned either 14 or 15 this past January. I think she's 15. And she's kind of like your typical family pet. You know, she lives with my mom and dad and, you know, she goes for her walks and she goes out in the backyard and plays with her toy and that kind of thing. But as a younger dog, I had her with me at the training facility and, you know, my parents would go on vacation and they'd leave her with me. And so she'd come down and we'd do some training together. And she learned as a young dog how to do things. And then, you know, she'd go back home with my parents. Well, just recently I brought Kit home with me for a few weeks just to give my parents some time to do some other things around the house. And I hadn't actually done any specific training with Kit since she was young. And I'm talking probably less than a year of age.
Okay.
And so it was so much fun because, you know, I brought her home with me and I thought, well, I'm going to have her earn her keep. She's going to do a little bit of training and I'm going to use her to film some videos for our Life Skills monthly members. And, you know, here's a dog who's now 15 who has not done any formal training at all for many, many, many years. And she was right on it. You know, we have all these great videos now in our Life Skills monthly members on the dashboard of Kit at 15 years of age, learning to do brand new things. She was super keen, having so much fun. And I'm sure she thoroughly enjoyed the time she spent with me because when I sent her home when I had to bring her home to my mom and dad, a couple weeks later, my dad said, you know, she seems so bored. She just lies around all day and she doesn't really do anything, you know, and you know, I feel bad for her because I have no doubt she was having fun with me. So I might have to go steal her again. Yeah.
Well, and she was very well received with the Life Skills monthly members because she's very cute and very eager. And
so eager.
That sweet old dog. Like old dogs are so special. Yeah. They really are. If you've lived with an old dog, you know that they are very, very special. And that excitement to work just turning on. Oh, that just makes me so happy.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So we've talked about the training aspect. We've talked about wellness exams. What are some of the things that you adjust in your home when you've got an older dog to make sure that they are safe and still getting around well?
Yeah. So mobility has obviously become a little bit more of an issue. I have my house, I have the main floor, and then I have the downstairs where we spend most of our time actually. And the downstairs, just until recently when we had our basement renovation, our downstairs was fantastic for the dogs because the entire downstairs was carpeted and it was so great for traction for the dogs. And it was perfect because my husband had his office set up down there. So the dogs, when they were home, spent 95% of their day downstairs with my husband, lounging around on the couch if they were able to get up on it. And my dogs were, even at older ages, able to hop onto the couch without any issues. But the downstairs had full carpeting, which was fantastic. The upstairs, though, was all hardwood. And so, I had area rugs and I had the ugliest the ugliest runner in my hallway. It was so ugly, but I only bought it because I wanted to give my dogs traction. So I thought, what, I'll put up with the ugliness for now because I want the old dogs to have traction when they're going up and down the hallway. Yeah. So I just made sure that I had carpets, I had runners in the hallways, and then that way they weren't slipping and sliding. And then the other thing I would do regularly, because I have border collies, with the border collie farm feet that get very hairy, I would always make sure, especially when they were older, that I would keep that fur on the bottom of their feet trimmed. So that way, they weren't slipping and sliding with the hairy feet. So I would do that. And I have a baby gate that's set up at the, in my kitchen entrance, which then goes down to my basement. There was a baby gate there. So that way the dogs couldn't go up or down without me being right there, even though they were, again, capable. I always wanted to make sure, especially one of my older dogs, Cinder, when she was 16, she started to have a little bit more difficulty on the stairs. She could do them, but the stairs going down to the basement, there's quite a few of them. And the last thing I wanted to have is an old dog tumble down the stairs. Yeah. So I would just make sure I would go in front of her when she was going down. When she was going up, I'd be right behind her. And then that way, if she did have a little stumble, I was right there to save her. But there were some adjustments and, it was worthwhile just to make their lives a little bit more comfortable in the house.
Perfect. What about clothing, keeping them a little bit warmer? Our old dogs don't have necessarily the circulation that they did when they were youngsters. Do you go to clothing inside the house, outside the house? Any changes that way?
I've never used clothing in the house for them. My border collies were all, my current two are smooth coats, so they don't have a lot of hair. But my older dogs were all rough coats and they had a lot of hair. So I never had issues with them being cold inside the house. But in the winter, I live up, in central Ontario in the snow belt. And it was, we've had some pretty cold winters and some winters with a lot of snow. And so I would make sure that I would adjust the amount of time that I was outside with them. And they did have winter coats. So they, on the really cold days, they wore winter coats. I'm still not even entirely sure they really needed them, but it made me feel better to put them on just to be on the safe side.
Yeah. I've been really lucky with very cold tolerant dogs. Ned actually has the worst heat tolerance of any of my tollers so far, and he definitely has a very thick coat as well. With my own guys, I've never needed to go to clothing. I will sometimes use boots for traction depending on what's going on. But yeah, I've never resorted to clothing with my tollers, but I could see if I had a dog with a short coat, that clothing might be an option or a necessity as they start to get a little bit older too. Any other changes that you make in terms of accessibility in the house? Any ramps or their feeding stations, et cetera?
I've never had to make any adjustments there. Like I said, my dogs, even like Scramble at 17 years of age, was still hopping up on the couch. It would amaze me. And she was quite good at it. And, when she got off the couch, I'd have to watch her a little bit. But no, I never had to worry about any ramps. Feeding stations, no, they were quite capable of still eating their food from their bowl on the floor. I guess maybe because I did such a good job of keeping them fit and healthy their entire life that they didn't really have too much difficulty. I know a lot of people do like to use the raised platforms for food if the dogs are having difficulty, but it's not something I had to do.
Yeah. And if you're noticing that they seem to be slow getting into their food, or these are some of the changes that you can make notice of, if, for example, Reggie, bless his heart, he is such a walking stomach. If I put his food down and he didn't dive into it with all the fervor in the world, if he was a little bit ginger and slow going to it, That's a pretty big sign for me that something's going on that's unusual for Reggie. So I might go to a raised bowl to see if that makes life a little bit easier for him. But things like that are options. I will go to lifting my dogs in and out of the car, for example, rather than carrying a ramp, just because my vehicles are so full with dog supplies. Anyways, if you open the back of my vehicle right now, there's probably like 4 big long tracking leashes. There's a portable crate. There's a platform. And then there's a whole bunch of random toys and cookies, and then there's dog crates, and oh my goodness, there's a lot of stuff in there. So ramp would not fit, but there are some really nice options for ramps. I know a friend of mine with her old boy has a sort of telescopic ramp that she keeps in her vehicle, and it shrinks down to maybe about 3 feet or so, and it fits in there nicely. It's really handy. I know that she uses that very, very well for her old lab, Remy, who is doing great, but aging as well. So as they get older, it's nice to have some options for them so that they're not doing that impact. Thinking about impact too, just always nice to be very careful. Those dogs that, for example, have been jogging partners for you for your life, et cetera, as they get into their older years. And the consistent repetitive pounding on hard surface can be hard on things like arthritis and whatnot. So worthwhile talking to your medical professional about maybe some supplements, or, just making sure that range of motion is still good and the dog doesn't look like they're overly concerned about those adventures anymore. So always good to work hand in hand with your professional healthcare providers to make sure that your old dogs are feeling good and still maintaining a good quality of life. So anything else that you think about that you make changes for with your old dogs?
Grooming.
Okay. Good one. Yeah, let's talk about that.
I approach that a little bit differently when they're older. So again, because I had rough-coated border collies, they did require some brushing, not as much as certain other breeds would, but, I would still have to brush them. And what I did with them, especially, as they're getting older, it's harder for them to be still or to stand for a long period of time. So if I would be doing any, brushing or combing, I would do a little bit here and a little bit there. And instead of doing them, their entire body in one go, when I'd be trimming their toenails, I always teach my dogs to lie down, to have their toenails trimmed from the very beginning anyways. And that just makes it easier because they lie down for their nails to be trimmed. But I'm thinking if I ever had a dog that had to stand to have their nails trimmed, again, I wouldn't expect an old dog to be able to stand there for a long period of time. So then I might just, resort to doing a couple toenails each day, that sort of thing if necessary. But I will definitely, be a little bit more cautious in terms of how much time I'm spending grooming them so that it's more of a pleasant experience for them and it's not such a long drawn out thing.
Yeah, that is such an important thing. I'm glad that we touched on that as well. I actually do the same thing, like very similarly. I'll spread my grooming out with Reggie over several days just because it's too much for him to stay in position and to be pulled on and prodded, et cetera, et cetera. He'll put up with it because he's well trained at this point, but I know that it's too much for him. So I'll do, maybe a quarter of his body, brush it out nicely each time we sit down for a grooming session. And I'm a little bit more gentle. And I make sure that I trim areas so that he's not getting burrs and whatnot when he's out and about. So I'm not having to pull burrs out of him and cause that little bit of maybe discomfort. Yeah, I definitely spread my grooming out as well. So that is a very important thing. Make sure that your scissors, your trimmers, if you're clipping toenails and not dremeling, make sure they are sharp, because when they're dull, you have to put a lot of pressure on that nail. And a lot of the times that can be tricky with old dogs who have a little bit of arthritis. So make sure they're nice and sharp so you have an easy time cutting those nails. Or we are actually just on the cusp of filming a YouTube video for introducing Dremel, the rotary tools for introducing grinders with your dogs and working through the challenges that presents. Which I think grinders for an old dog are a really, really nice thing because they don't put the pressure on the nail that having to cut through with a scissor style or a guillotine style clipper might put on there. So that's a good one. Check out, watch for that on our YouTube video, our YouTube channel. It will probably be out there already once we publish this podcast episode.
That's right.
Yeah. Anything else you wanted to talk about in terms of our old dogs? extra snuggles.
Of course, extra snuggles. And of course, I will say that I get to a point with my old dogs where there's really no more rules. You know, I think a scramble one night, I had just finished eating some apple pie and I put my plate down on the end table next to the couch. And I turned around for a moment to do something. And when I turned back around, there was Scramble with her feet up on the end table at 17 years of age, eating the leftover pie off of the plate. And I thought, if that was any one of my other dogs, that just would not have been allowed. But I thought, you know what? You go for it. You want another piece? Gosh. I'll happily get you another piece.
Bless her heart.
No rules.
Yeah. And that's the funny thing. Once you get to there's a certain switch that flips and you go, okay, you don't have to do anything you don't want to anymore. Right. You have given me all these years.
It's good.
Exactly. Absolutely. Well, and you get to like Reggie's stone deaf now. So all the stuff all the hard work I put into making sure he had reliable verbal commands is out the window at this point anyways.
Good thing they're masters of body language.
Exactly. And I've been reteaching him how to listen without actually being able to hear anything, which luckily his eyesight is very good and he has no problem. If he's at the back of the yard and I wave at him, he comes toddling right back in happily. So.
Yeah. And actually that's something we should just very briefly touch on.
Let's.
Dogs as they age, they might lose their eyesight. They might have some cataracts or maybe they start going deaf. So if you notice that your dog is not listening the way they were listening before, then there could very well be a very good reason for that. So don't assume, a lot of people say, oh, my dog's being stubborn. Dogs are not stubborn, right? There may be something else going on, like some eyesight issues or some hearing issues that you have to adjust to.
Yeah. And actually on that note, one of the best tips that I have ever heard, if you have a dog that is aging and you think that there's going to be vision issues there, is using essential oil smells like at the top of stairs and things like that, just to signify for the dog, to help them recognize they're about to hit the stairs, et cetera. Knowing not to move around furniture and whatnot will really help those dogs as well. So if you have a dog that's aging, it's good to start those things early as well so that they get used to it while they're still partially sighted. Yeah. Oh my goodness. We had such I really enjoyed talking about the old dogs and I really Reggie is so endearing right now. I mean, he's always been endearing. He's lovely and I adore him and I've loved him since the day he came home. But at 14 and as an old boy, there's this very special thing that our old dogs bring to our lives. So I hope that all of you get to experience having an old dog in your life and enjoying those old dogs.
It's such a gift.
Yes, it is. And hopefully the days are nice and long for you yet with those old dogs. Hopefully Reggie's around for a long time yet to come. He still brings so much joy to my life and we still have so much fun training and interacting on a daily basis. And if you would like some help with your dogs, old or young, puppies or older dogs, we have programs for you both online and in person. So please have a look at mccanndogs.com to see what we can offer you. We have programs that are going to help you prepare for a puppy, going to help you train a puppy, going to help you train older dogs. And then we get into all sorts of fun higher learning concepts in our online programs as well. So if you'd like some personalized feedback to help with your dog, see what we can offer you in the McCann Dogs Homeschool. And on that note, I'm Shannon.
I'm Robbie.
Happy training.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the McCann Dogs podcast. And if you'd like some more training resources, be sure to check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at McCann Dogs. And if you'd like to train with us online, be sure to check out the show notes below for our My Dog Can online training program, where we know in just a few weeks your dog will become a well-behaved family member. Until then, happy training.